Hi, Chav Charlton. Sorry, Chaz Charlton. Just a running joke with the name thing. Okay, right, I'm going to make a response to your video. I've got a few notes here in my little book. Okay, he kind of caricatured the antinatalist position. He said, I'm going to deny the person, this person existence to avoid suffering, but you use the word avoid. Now if you use the word avoid, implicit in that word is the notion of stopping somebody from having something that they want. But of course you can't stop somebody from having something that they want if they don't exist, because they don't want anything. You have a problem with this better never to have been line of reasoning, because you ask better for who, and you kind of like, you're scratching your head and you don't understand that. But I think I've made quite clear in some of my other videos that it's not that not bringing new people into the world is better for somebody per se. It's that it's resulting in an objectively better state of affairs than would have been the case if you'd actually brought somebody into existence, and then consequently they would suffer needlessly. You know, the universe in which there is suffering is objectively inferior to a universe in which that person wouldn't suffer, and this is not a subjective call. You're just looking at two situations and you're seeing less suffering in one, and you're saying that from a moral perspective it's better that there's less suffering in the world. So that's why it's better never to have been. It's better for the objective state of affairs in the universe. You know, if somebody who would have suffered didn't actually come into existence to experience that suffering. So that's why it's better. It doesn't have to be framed in terms of somebody's subjective appreciation of the state of affairs. You question this idea of, you know, you say even if the premises are sound, that doesn't necessarily mean that the conclusions are sound. Now, I would argue that as long as the premises are sound in theory, and as long as the conclusions from those premises naturally flow from those, as long as the conclusions naturally flow from the premises, then there's no room for rebuttal. I mean, it's the onus is on you, if you're challenging, you know, the premises and the conclusion, to either attack the premises, you know, or show how there has been some kind of foul work at play in terms of linking the premises to the conclusion. But I would argue the premises that I've made are rock solid. You know, suffering is a bad thing. Non-existent people cannot be deprived. If someone comes into existence, then inevitably they will experience at least some harm and suffering. These are not controversial claims at all. You know, I challenge you to deny any of those premises. So if you can't attack those premises, then all that's left for you is to attack the process from which a conclusion is drawn from those premises. You know, and the premise is that someone who doesn't exist cannot be deprived, shows that the conclusion is that there is no reason whatsoever to bring somebody into existence for their own sake. So you can't, that's undeniable. You can't question that, or you can question it, but I'm still waiting for a rational objection to it. You know, and I've argued that if you bring someone into existence and they suffer, that's objectively a worse state of affairs than if that person hadn't come into existence. You know, and again, I challenge you to attack that premise. And if you can't do that, there's only one natural conclusion that flows from that. Well, there are several, but the main conclusion that flows from that is that it's at the very least misguided to bring people into the world you know, for their own sake. Right. You said, okay, I'll accept antinatalism, but that would still leave the problem of animals behind who would suffer if they're sentient. Now, I would argue that if we could reach the decision to in a coordinated manner phase out the human race, then the last few remaining humans alive could disrupt the evolutionary process that has been going on or at or near the surface of this planet for hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of years. You know, the last few remaining survivors towards the end of the antinatalist process could detonate the planet, or in some other way hinder any prospect of life re-emerging. I mean, obviously there might be bacteria left behind, and some people might argue, well, what's to stop that bacteria from eventually, you know, going through an evolutionary process and developing into creatures that develop ambulation and digestive systems and the need to eat and last of all consciousness. But I would argue, if you killed all the like sentient creatures that are on the planet, then at the very least you would be creating, you know, an objectively better state of affairs with the less suffering for an indefinite period of time, and a very long indefinite period of time at that, because evolution is a very slow, gradual process, and sentience wouldn't just emerge overnight or in a few hundred years or whatever. You know, it would take millennia, eons, and there would still be no guarantee that sentient life would re-emerge at all. And given that the sun, you know, is projected to consume the Earth in 4 billion years or so, you know, there is not a huge window of opportunity for life, bacteria to develop consciousness through evolutionary processes, you know, and it's not a given that sentience would even emerge again. And, you know, the very worst thing that could happen would be that there'd be a long period of deprivation-free, suffering-free, existence-free state of affairs on this planet for an extremely extended period of time. And all things being equal, that would be a better state of affairs. You suggest alternative measures to the problem of suffering in the world: reproduction policies, engineered societies, get-out clause for people to be euthanized in a pain-free and stigma-free manner. But I would argue that these are just partial solutions that don't get to the core of the problem, you know. And the core of the problem is people and animals, if you like, coming into existence and developing sentience and being self-aware and being privy to all the pain and suffering that bodies are exposed to, and all the mental torment, the angst, the discomfort, the suffering, the horror. So they're just partial solutions. I mean, could potentially significantly reduce the pain and suffering in the world, but they would by no means eliminate all of it. So I don't think they're good enough. You say you personally don't regret being born. You don't see life as something that was imposed on you, but with all due respect, you're just one person, you know, out of approaching 7 billion people. So, you know, if everybody felt the same way as you, I wouldn't be pushing for this antinatalism thing. But not everyone is like you, unfortunately. You have a problem with me persistently talking about the worst case scenarios, and you think that I'm amplifying these, but the reason why I use worst case scenarios is the same way that when a jury prosecutes someone who's been found guilty of drink driving, throws the book of law at them to the full extent, is because if you catch someone who's been drink driving and you punish them, you're trying to deter the possibility of somebody being, horrendously injured or suffered or killed in a very unpleasant manner. So therefore, when you find somebody and prosecute someone who's been caught drink driving, you need to bear in mind the worst case scenario of their behaviour, even if their behaviour did not result in a worst case scenario. So it's the same thing with antinatalism, or at least it should be. We need to look at the worst case scenario and then throw all the powers we can to deter that behaviour that could have resulted in great harm and suffering. And if we want to do this in the best manner, and we have to look at the worst case scenario. The same with the drink driving. Let's take these headphones off. Can't get comfortable here. What else have we got here? Yeah, you talked about the Pollyanna rejects the asymmetry video response I made, and you said that I was too much on the woman's case about using the term like anyone else, but you said it's just a mistake on her part in her wording. But basically, if you're going to write a review on a philosophical piece of work, and then publish it on the internet, then you need to be extremely careful and conscientious about what words you use to express the ideas and notions that you wish to articulate. And if you write something, you can reread it, you can edit it. So there's really no excuse for such sloppy worded sentiments. And that's what they were. They were sentiments because they weren't grounded in reality, because not everyone else in the world is just like Charlie, So that's why I pointed that out in that video. You talk about, you need to take into consideration the background of the family. Are they well adjusted? Do they have a comfortable family life? Are they well educated? Are they financially solvent? Because if they come from that kind of background, then the risk is less that they will suffer than if they, say, come from a disadvantaged background where there's alcohol abuse or whatever. Now, of course, I'd acknowledge that there's less of a risk if the family is the well-adjusted one, but my point is that there is still a risk, of great harm and suffering, and that risk still exists regardless of the background of the family that bring that child into existence, and it's still a problem, it's still a risk, it's still an unnecessary risk if we're going to just focus this purely on the interests of the child who we may be bringing into existence. Because when you bring them into existence, from that point onwards, they have interests and needs and moral value, so we have to anticipate the consequences of our behaviour prior to bringing them into the world, because you can't do the calculations after they're born if they've been harmed, because by that time it's too late. So you've got to think ahead of making the decision to bring people into the world if you want to run a foolproof way of avoiding any risk of harm and suffering whatsoever, and any risk of deprivation whatsoever. That's coming up to 15 minutes. Alright, there's your response.